Nicholas Mills saw her in the garbage dump, clutching her son like the world had ended. His housekeeper, the woman who used to leave fresh flowers in his kitchen, and in that moment, his entire world stopped. Tacoma, Washington. He wasn't paying attention, his mind already at the Harbor Island development deal waiting for him across the city. His black Escalade wound through streets he'd never seen, past the Port of Tacoma shipping yards, past chain-link fences and shuttered warehouses, until the road ended at the Pierce County landfill. That's when he saw her, sitting in the trash. A woman in a torn blue uniform, her face buried in her hands, a small boy pressed against her chest. The morning fog rolled in from Commencement Bay, but Nicholas could see her clearly now. The dark curly hair, the way she held that child. His heart slammed against his ribs. Elizabeth Dyer, his housekeeper of 3 years. The quiet woman who cleaned his Bellevue penthouse every Monday and Thursday, who folded his towels in perfect thirds, who left lilies on his counter without ever asking for thanks. She was sitting in a garbage dump. Nicholas was out of the car before his mind could catch up. His dress shoes sank into the mud as he ran toward her, the stench of rot filling his lungs. But he didn't slow down. He just kept running, his chest tight, his hands shaking. "Elizabeth!" She looked up. Her eyes met his, and something broke in both of them. Her face was hollow. Her hands were bleeding. The boy in her arms, William, wasn't even crying anymore, just staring, empty. Nicholas dropped to his knees in the filth beside them, his $3,000 suit pressing into garbage and mud, and he didn't care. He didn't care about anything except the woman in front of him, trembling, broken, trying to speak but unable to form words. "What happened to you?" he whispered, his voice cracking. She shook her head, tears streaming down her face, and all she could say was, "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." Nicholas felt something he hadn't felt in 5 years, not since his daughter Emma died. A crack in the wall he'd built around his heart. He'd spent those years running, building, accumulating, anything to avoid the pain. But kneeling there in the garbage, holding Elizabeth's bleeding hand, he realized something. God had led him here, not to a business deal, not to another property, but to this, to her, to this moment. Before we begin, like, subscribe, and tell me where in the world you're watching from, because maybe this story found you for a reason. Maybe you need to remember that even in the darkest places, grace still shows up. Elizabeth couldn't look at him. Her whole body was shaking, her arms wrapped tight around William like she was afraid someone would tear him away. The boy's face was pressed into her chest, his little fingers gripping her torn uniform. Nicholas knelt there in the mud, his hand still holding hers, and he could feel her pulse racing beneath the cuts and dirt. Her palm was ice cold. "Elizabeth, please," he said softly. "Tell me what happened." She shook her head, tears dripping onto William's hair. Her voice came out broken, barely a whisper. "I didn't know where else to go." Nicholas felt his throat tighten. The woman he'd seen every week for 3 years, always smiling quietly as she worked, always neat and careful, was sitting in trash, bleeding, holding her son like it was the end of the world. He looked at William. The boy's lips were cracked white. His skin had a greyish tint. Nicholas had seen that look before, in the hospital with Emma, when her body started giving up. "When did you last eat?" Nicholas asked. Elizabeth's face crumpled. "Yesterday morning. We found some bread behind a grocery store." The words hit Nicholas like a fist to the chest. "Come on," he said, standing and reaching for her. "Let me help you up." She flinched, pulling back. "Mr. Mills, I can't. I'm filthy. Your car. I don't care about the car. But Elizabeth," he said her name firmly, gently. "I don't care." She stared at him for a long moment, searching his face like she was trying to understand if this was real. Then, slowly, she let him help her stand. Her legs wobbled. Nicholas caught her, one arm around her shoulders, and reached down to lift William with the other. The boy was so light, it scared him. Nicholas carried them up the slope, their weight nothing compared to the heaviness pressing on his chest. The smell of garbage clung to them, sour and sharp, but he didn't let go. He opened the back door of his Escalade and set them inside carefully, like they might break. William's eyes were wide, terrified, darting around the leather interior like he'd never seen anything like it. Elizabeth kept whispering, I'm sorry, over and over. Nicholas pulled off his jacket and wrapped it around the boy. Then he slid into the driver's seat and grabbed his phone. His assistant Jennifer answered on the first ring. "Mr. Mills, the Harbour Island team is waiting." "Cancel it," Nicholas said. "What?" "Cancel everything today. I don't care what it is." There was a pause. "Sir, this deal has been 6 months in the making." "Jennifer." His voice was steady, but there was something in it that made her go quiet. "Cancel it all." He hung up and pulled onto the road, his hands gripping the wheel. In the rearview mirror, he could see Elizabeth staring out the window, tears sliding down her face, one hand stroking William's matted hair. Nicholas didn't know what had happened to them. Not yet. But as he drove toward Virginia Mason Hospital, the same place where he'd watched his daughter die 5 years ago, he made a silent promise. "Whatever it takes," he thought. "Whatever it takes, I'm not leaving them." The drive to Virginia Mason took 23 minutes. Nicholas kept glancing in the rearview mirror. Elizabeth sat perfectly still, staring at her hands in her lap. William had stopped trembling, but his eyes were distant, like he wasn't really there anymore. Nicholas's mind kept going back. Monday mornings, Thursday afternoons. Elizabeth, arriving at his penthouse in her navy blue uniform, always on time, always quiet. She'd move through his home like a whisper, never asking for anything, never making noise. He remembered the lilies, every week, fresh ones on the kitchen counter. He'd never asked her to do that. She just did. He remembered how she folded the towels, perfectly even thirds, stacked by color. He remembered her smile, small, gentle, the kind that didn't ask for anything back. And then one day, she just wasn't there anymore. His assistant had mentioned it in passing. "The cleaning service sent someone new," said Elizabeth, resigned. Nicholas had been on a call with investors. He'd nodded, said fine, and forgotten about it. He gripped the steering wheel tighter. How long had it been? 2 months? 3? Behind him, Elizabeth's voice broke the silence. "You don't have to do this." Nicholas looked at her in the mirror. "Do what?" "Help us." Her voice was small, ashamed. "You have important things. I heard your assistant. You have a deal." "Elizabeth, stop." "But Mr. Mills, My name is Nicholas," he said it quietly. "And there's nothing more important than this." She pressed her lips together, fresh tears spilling over. William shifted in her arms, and she held him tighter. "I used to work for you," she whispered. "I wasn't supposed to bother you with my problems. I didn't know what else to do. We've been at that dump for 3 days, and I kept praying someone would see us. Anyone. And then you." Her voice broke. "You were the last person I expected." Nicholas felt something twist in his chest. "Why didn't you call me?" "I tried." Elizabeth wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, smearing dirt across her cheek. "I called the agency, East Side Cleaning. I begged them to give you a message. They said you'd already asked for someone new. They told me not to call again." Nicholas's jaw tightened. He'd never said that. He'd never even thought it. "I believed them," Elizabeth continued, her voice shaking. "Why wouldn't I? You're a busy man. Important. I was just the person who cleaned your home." "You weren't just anything," Nicholas said, his voice rough. Elizabeth looked up, surprised. The hospital came into view. Nicholas pulled into the emergency entrance and threw the car into park. He got out and opened the back door, reaching for William. The boy pulled back, burying his face in Elizabeth's shoulder. "It's okay, buddy," Nicholas said gently. "I'm not going to hurt you." William peeked out, his eyes wide and wet. He looked at Nicholas for a long moment. Then, slowly, he let Nicholas lift him out of the car. The boy weighed almost nothing. Nicholas could feel his ribs through the thin shirt. Elizabeth climbed out after them, stumbling slightly. Nicholas steadied her with his free arm and walked them both through the automatic doors. A nurse looked up from the desk, her eyes widening at the sight of them. Nicholas knew what she saw. A man in an expensive suit, covered in mud and filth, carrying a half-starved child and supporting a bleeding woman who looked like she'd crawled out of hell. "They need help," Nicholas said. His voice was calm, but his eyes weren't. "Right now." The doctors took William first. A nurse lifted him gently from Nicholas's arms and carried him down the hall. The boy reached back toward his mother, his small hand stretching out, but he didn't cry. He just watched her until they turned the corner, and he disappeared. Elizabeth's knees buckled. Nicholas caught her, guided her to a chair in the waiting area. A doctor came over, young, efficient, asking questions. Elizabeth tried to answer, but her words kept breaking apart. Nicholas stepped in. "Just help her, please. I'll handle everything else." The doctor nodded, called for another nurse. They took Elizabeth back for treatment. Nicholas gave the front desk his credit card, told them to do whatever was needed, and then sat down in the empty waiting room. His hands were still dirty. He stared at them, at the mud under his nails, the garbage stains on his shirt cuffs. 5 years he'd spent building, acquiring, closing deals, and he'd never once stopped to notice when the woman who cared for his home had vanished. An hour passed, then another. Finally, a nurse came out and said he could see Elizabeth. She was in a room on the 3rd floor, her hands bandaged, an IV in her arm. She looked small in the hospital bed, her hair still damp from where they'd cleaned her. Nicholas pulled a chair close and sat down. "They're giving William fluids," she said quietly. "They said he's severely dehydrated, malnourished." Her voice cracked on the last word. "He's going to be okay," Nicholas said. Elizabeth closed her eyes, fresh tears sliding down her cheeks. For a long time, she didn't speak. Then, slowly, the story came. 6 months ago, David, her husband, a roofing job in Renton, near the landing. 3-story fall. The company said he wasn't wearing his harness, but Elizabeth had seen it in his truck that morning, had watched him check it twice like he always did. They denied the death benefits, said it was his fault. The funeral cost $8,000. William's asthma medicine, without insurance, was $340 a month. She borrowed from a loan company on Rainier Avenue. Quick cash loans, $8,000 at first, but the interest was 400%. In 3 months, she owed $23,000. "They started coming to my apartment," Elizabeth whispered. "Late at night, banging on the door, yelling. My neighbors complained. My landlord gave me 72 hours to leave." Nicholas felt sick. "I called the agency," she continued. "Begged them to reach you. They said you didn't want me anymore, that you'd asked for someone new." She looked at him. I thought I'd done something wrong." "You didn't," Nicholas said, his voice tight. "I never said that. I never even knew you were gone." Elizabeth's face twisted, with something between relief and despair. "We lived in my car for 5 weeks," she said. "A 2001 Honda Civic, parked behind thrift stores. William went to school from the car. He never told anyone." She swallowed hard. "Then they took the car, and I didn't know what to do. Someone told me people go to the dump to find things to sell. I thought maybe—" She couldn't finish. Nicholas stood up, walked to the window. Seattle stretched out below, the city lights just starting to flicker on. His chest felt like it was caving in. He was worth $400 million. He'd spent $12,000 on a watch last month, and Elizabeth had been digging through garbage to feed her son. Nicholas didn't leave the hospital that night. He called his office, told them he wouldn't be in. He ignored the emails piling up on his phone, the messages from investors, the Harbor Island team asking what happened. None of it mattered. He sat in the chair beside Elizabeth's bed as the sky outside turned dark. She'd fallen asleep, finally, her breathing shallow but steady. Down the hall, William was in pediatrics, hooked up to monitors, his small body fighting to come back. Nicholas walked down to see him. The boy was awake, staring at the ceiling. When Nicholas stepped into the room, William's eyes darted toward him, then away, afraid. "Hey, buddy," Nicholas said softly, staying near the door. "I'm not going to hurt you." William didn't respond, just watched him from the corner of his eye. Nicholas sat down in the chair by the window. He didn't move closer, didn't push. He just sat there, quiet, letting the boy know he wasn't going anywhere. After a while, William's eyes started to close. His breathing evened out. Nicholas stayed until he was sure the boy was asleep. Then he walked back to Elizabeth's room and sat down again. The hallway was quiet. Somewhere a monitor beeped. A nurse walked past, her shoes squeaking on the floor. Nicholas stared at his hands. They were clean now, washed in the bathroom down the hall, but he could still feel the garbage, the mud, the cold of Elizabeth's skin when he'd knelt beside her. He thought about Emma, the way she'd looked in her hospital bed 5 years ago, her small body disappearing under the white sheets. The way he'd sat just like this, helpless, watching her slip away. He'd buried his heart with her, stopped feeling, stopped believing in anything except work, deals, building something bigger so he wouldn't have to think about what he'd lost. But But sitting here now, watching Elizabeth breathe, knowing William was down the hall fighting to survive, Nicholas felt something breaking open inside him, something he thought was dead. It hurt. God, it hurt. He leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his hands pressed together. He hadn't prayed in 5 years, didn't even know if he believed anymore, but he whispered it anyway. If you're there, if you're listening, don't let them fall through the cracks, please. His voice cracked on the last word. The room stayed silent. No answer, no sign, just the quiet hum of the IV machine and Elizabeth's soft breathing. Nicholas sat back, wiped his eyes, and stayed. Morning came slowly. Grey light filtered through the window. Elizabeth stirred, blinked, looked around like she didn't know where she was. Then she saw Nicholas sitting there, still in his ruined suit, and her face crumpled. "You stayed," she whispered. "I'm not going anywhere," Nicholas said. But Elizabeth shook her head, tears already starting. "You don't understand. You can't fix this. I owe $23,000. I have nothing. No job, no home. Even if William gets better, we have nowhere to go." Nicholas leaned forward. "Elizabeth, I can't take charity from you," she said, her voice breaking. "I already feel like I'm drowning you in my mess. You've done enough, more than enough. It's not charity. Then what is it?" She looked at him, desperate, ashamed. "Why are you doing this?" Nicholas didn't have an answer, not one that made sense. He just knew that walking away wasn't an option anymore. Nicholas came back the next morning, and the morning after that, he'd go home, to shower, change clothes, then drive straight to Virginia Mason before the sun came up. He brought coffee, breakfast sandwiches from the diner on Madison. He'd sit with Elizabeth while she ate, neither of them saying much. On the third day, William was strong enough to sit up. Nicholas walked into the room and the boy looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time. "Hi, William," Nicholas said quietly. The boy didn't answer, just stared. Nicholas pulled a chair close but didn't sit yet. "Is it okay if I stay for a bit?" William glanced at his mother. Elizabeth nodded gently. The boy looked back at Nicholas and gave the smallest nod. Nicholas sat down. He didn't try to talk, just sat there while the nurse checked William's vitals, while Elizabeth smoothed his hair, while the boy's eyes slowly began to lose that hollow, far-away look. The next day, Nicholas brought a book, Where the Wild Things Are. He hadn't touched it in 5 years. It had been Emma's favorite. "Would you like me to read to you?" Nicholas asked. William hesitated, then nodded. Nicholas opened the book, his hands shaking slightly, and began. His voice cracked on the first page, but he kept going. By the end, William was watching him, not the pictures. "Again," the boy whispered. Nicholas's throat tightened. "Yeah, buddy, again." A week passed. William started eating full meals. His cheeks filled out, his eyes got brighter. One morning, Nicholas arrived and William smiled at him. Small, shy, but real. "Mr. Nick," the boy said softly. Nicholas looked up. "Yeah? Can we go for a walk?" Nicholas glanced at Elizabeth. She nodded, her eyes glistening. Nicholas helped William into a wheelchair and pushed him down the hallway, past other rooms, past the nurse's station. They stopped by a window overlooking Elliott Bay. The ferries were crossing the grey water, seagulls circling above. "My dad used to take me to see the boats," William said quietly. Nicholas felt his chest tighten. "Yeah?" "Before he died." William's voice was matter-of-fact, but his hands gripped the armrests. "Mama said he's in heaven now." Nicholas didn't know what to say. He just stood there, looking out at the water. "Do you have kids, Mr. Nick?" The question hit Nicholas like a punch. He closed his eyes for a second, then opened them. "I had a daughter once. Her name was Emma." "Where is she?" "She's in heaven too." William looked up at him. "Do you miss her?" "Every single day." The boy reached out and took Nicholas's hand. His grip was small, warm, trusting. "I think she'd be happy you found us," William said. Nicholas's vision blurred. He squeezed the boy's hand gently and didn't let go. That night, Elizabeth finally spoke what had been sitting between them. They were alone in her room, William asleep down the hall. She looked at Nicholas, her eyes filled with something close to fear. "Why are you really doing this?" she asked. "And please don't tell me it's just kindness. Nobody does this. Not for people like me." Nicholas sat down slowly. He was quiet for a long time. "5 years ago, I lost everything that mattered, he said finally. I spent every day since then building things, buying things, trying to fill the space she left. But nothing worked. I stopped feeling anything. He looked at Elizabeth. Then I saw you in that dump, and something broke open. Elizabeth's eyes filled with tears. I don't know why I took that exit, Nicholas continued. I don't know why my GPS rerouted. But I keep thinking, maybe it wasn't an accident. You think God led you there? Elizabeth whispered. I don't know what I think anymore. Nicholas's voice was raw. But for the first time in 5 years, I feel like my life might actually mean something. 2 weeks in, Elizabeth was cleared to leave the hospital. William was stronger, his color back, his lungs clear. The doctors said they could go home. Except they didn't have a home. Nicholas found Elizabeth in her room that afternoon, packing the few donated clothes the hospital had given her into a plastic bag. Her hands were moving fast, mechanical, like she was trying not to think. Elizabeth, Nicholas said from the doorway. She didn't look up. The social worker came by. She found a shelter that has space. We can stay there until I find work. You're not going to a shelter, Mr. Mills. Nicholas, she stopped packing. Her shoulders tensed. Nicholas, you've done more than anyone could ever ask. You saved our lives. But I can't keep taking from you. You're not taking anything. Yes, I am. She turned to face him, and her eyes were fierce, desperate. Every day you're here, every meal you bring, every dollar you spend on us, I feel smaller. Do you understand that? I used to have a husband, a home, a job I was proud of. I took care of my son. I took care of myself. Her voice broke. Now I'm the woman you found in the garbage, the charity case, and I don't know how to be that. Nicholas stepped closer. That's not what you are. Then what am I? Elizabeth's hands were shaking. Because I don't know anymore. I don't know who I am without my dignity. The words hit Nicholas hard. He stood there, silent, because he didn't have an answer that wouldn't sound empty. Elizabeth wiped her eyes roughly. I'm grateful. God knows I'm grateful. But I need to stand on my own again. I need to be able to look my son in the eye and tell him his mother isn't broken. You're not broken. Yes, I am. Her voice was a whisper now. I let my son live in a dump. I couldn't protect him. I couldn't even feed him. What kind of mother does that make me? Nicholas felt something crack in his chest. He thought about Emma, about sitting beside her hospital bed, helpless, watching her fade, about the guilt that never left, the voice that whispered he should have done more, tried harder, found a better doctor, a different treatment. He understood that kind of breaking. You did everything you could, Nicholas said quietly. The system failed you, not the other way around. Elizabeth shook her head. It doesn't matter whose fault it was. I still failed him. No, Nicholas said, and there was something raw in his voice now. You held him. You kept him alive. You didn't give up even when you had every reason to. That's not failure, Elizabeth. That's love. She looked at him, tears streaming down her face, and for a long moment neither of them spoke. Then Elizabeth's voice came out small, broken. I don't know how to accept this, any of this. I don't know how to let you help without losing myself. Nicholas stepped closer. Then don't think of it as help. Think of it as a job. Elizabeth frowned, confused. I want to start a foundation, Nicholas said, for women like you, domestic workers who fall through the cracks, women who work hard, do everything right, and still end up with nothing when tragedy hits. He paused. And I want you to run it. Elizabeth stared at him like he'd lost his mind. I can't. You can, Nicholas said. You know what it's like. You know what they need, because you've lived it. I'm not qualified. You're more qualified than anyone. Elizabeth shook her head, backing away. This is insane. You can't fix my entire life because you feel guilty. This isn't about guilt, Nicholas said, and his voice cracked. This is about the fact that I've spent 5 years building an empire that means nothing, and then I found you, and for the first time since my daughter died, I feel like maybe my life could actually matter. The room went silent. Elizabeth's face twisted with emotion. She opened her mouth, closed it, then finally whispered, I'm scared. Of what? That I'll wake up and this will all disappear. That you'll realize I'm not worth it. Nicholas's throat tightened. You are worth it. You always were. Elizabeth didn't answer right away. She sat down on the hospital bed, her hands folded in her lap, staring at the floor. Nicholas waited. Minutes passed. The room was so quiet he could hear the clock on the wall ticking. Finally, Elizabeth spoke. "What would I even do?" Nicholas pulled a chair over and sat across from her. "You'd help other women. Find them housing, connect them with legal aid. Make sure they don't fall through the same cracks you did." "I don't know how to do any of that." "Neither did I when I started building," Nicholas said. "But you learn, and you won't be alone. I'll help. We'll hire people who know what they're doing." Elizabeth looked up at him, her eyes red. "Why does it have to be me?" "Because you understand." Nicholas leaned forward. "Every woman who walks through that door is going to see someone in a suit telling them what they need. But when they see you, they'll see someone who survived. Someone who knows what it feels like." Elizabeth's chin trembled. She pressed her lips together, trying to hold it in, but the tears came anyway. "I'm so tired," she whispered. "I'm so tired of being broken." "Then let me help you put the pieces back together." She looked at him for a long time, searching his face. Then, slowly, she nodded. It wasn't a yes, not yet, but it was something. The next morning, Nicholas took them to see a house. A small craftsman in Columbia City, 3 bedrooms, a front porch, a backyard with a maple tree. It needed some work, but it was solid, safe. William ran through the empty rooms, his footsteps echoing on the hardwood floors. His laughter bounced off the walls, bright and clear. Elizabeth stood in the kitchen doorway, her hand over her mouth, tears streaming down her face. "This is too much," she said. "It's yours if you want it," Nicholas said quietly. Elizabeth turned to him. "I can't pay you back. Not for years. Maybe never. I'm not asking you to. But, Elizabeth," Nicholas looked at her, "let me do this. Please." She closed her eyes, more tears falling. Then she nodded. William came running back, grabbing his mother's hand. "Mama, there's a tree. Can we get a swing?" Elizabeth laughed through her tears, pulling him close. "Yeah, baby. We can get a swing." Nicholas watched them, something shifting in his chest. For 5 years, he'd felt nothing but emptiness. But standing here, watching William's joy, seeing Elizabeth smile for the first time, he felt something he thought was gone forever. Hope. That night, Nicholas drove back to his penthouse alone. The space felt cold, empty. He walked to the window overlooking Elliott Bay, the city lights stretching out below. He thought about Emma, about how much she would have loved William's laugh, about how she used to beg him to help people, to use his money for something good. "I'm trying, sweetheart," he whispered to the glass. "I'm finally trying." His phone buzzed. A text from Elizabeth. "Thank you for seeing us, for stopping, for everything." Nicholas stared at the message. Then he typed back, "Thank you for letting me." He set the phone down and stood there in the silence, feeling the weight of 5 years start to lift, piece by piece. 3 months passed. The Dyer Foundation opened quietly in a small office on South Jackson Street. Nicholas funded it with $10 million from his personal accounts. Elizabeth resisted at first, said it was too much, but Nicholas was firm. "This isn't charity," he told her. "This is an investment in something that actually matters." Elizabeth started slow. She was terrified she'd fail, that she wouldn't know what to do. But the first woman who walked through the door was a hotel housekeeper named Rosa, whose son had cerebral palsy. She'd been evicted after missing work to care for him. Elizabeth sat across from her and understood every word, every fear, every desperate prayer. She helped Rosa find housing, connected her with disability services, got her son into a program that could help. When Rosa left, she hugged Elizabeth so tight neither of them could breathe. "You saved us," Rosa whispered. Elizabeth stood there after she left, shaking, tears streaming down her face. Nicholas found her like that an hour later, sitting at her desk, staring at the paperwork. "You okay?" he asked. She looked up at him. "I helped her. I actually helped her." Nicholas smiled. "I told you, by the end of the first month, they'd helped 9 families. By the end of the second, 23. Elizabeth worked 18-hour days, fueled by something. Nicholas recognized the need to give back what had been given to her. William thrived. He enrolled at Aki Kurosi Middle School, made the honor roll, joined the basketball team. He started calling Nicholas Mr. Nick, said it easier than Mr. Mills. On Sundays, they had dinner together, sometimes at Elizabeth's house in Columbia City, sometimes at Nicholas's penthouse. They cooked, they laughed, they talked about things that mattered, about grief, about Emma, about David, about how broken people find their way back. One Sunday evening, William asked the question that changed everything. "Mr. Nick, why don't you have kids anymore?" Elizabeth started to scold him, but Nicholas held up his hand. His throat was tight, but he answered, "I did have a daughter once. Her name was Emma. She got sick and went to heaven." William thought about that. "Like my dad, like your dad. Do you miss her?" "Every single day." William was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I think she'd be happy you found us." Nicholas felt tears rise. He excused himself, stepped out onto the balcony. The city sparkled below, Elliott Bay dark and calm. He gripped the railing, his chest tight. For the first time since Emma died, he felt her presence, not as pain, not as loss, but as something else, like she was telling him it was okay to live again. The next afternoon, William walked into Nicholas's office at Mills Development, carrying a folder. He was shy, nervous. "I made you something, Mr. Nick." Nicholas opened it. Inside was a crayon drawing on white construction paper. 3 figures standing together on a beach, the sun breaking through storm clouds, a tall man in a suit, a woman with curly hair, a small boy between them, holding both their hands. Underneath, in careful letters, "You found us when we were lost. Thank you for being our angel." Nicholas stared at it, unable to speak. His eyes filled. This simple drawing from a 10-year-old boy was worth more than every deal he'd ever closed. William's voice was small. "Mama says you saved us, but I think maybe we saved you too." Nicholas pulled him into a hug, something he hadn't done since Emma died. "You did, buddy," he whispered. "You absolutely did." 1 year after the wrong turn, Nicholas drove back to the Pierce County landfill. Elizabeth and William rode with him. They parked where he'd parked that Tuesday morning, looking out at the mountains of garbage and Commencement Bay beyond. "I think about this place every day," Elizabeth said quietly. Nicholas nodded. "Me too." William squeezed both their hands. "But you stopped, Mr. Nick. You didn't drive away." The Dyer Foundation had helped 342 families in 1 year. 342 women who'd been invisible, discarded, forgotten. They had housing now, legal help, healthcare, hope. That evening, they attended a fundraising gala at the Fairmont Olympic Hotel. 400 donors filled the ballroom. Elizabeth stood at the podium in a navy blue dress, her hands shaking slightly as she gripped the microphone. "A year ago," she began, her voice steady, "I was living in a dump with my son, digging through trash to survive. I thought God had forgotten us." The room was silent, but he hadn't. He sent a man who took a wrong turn off Interstate 5, and that wrong turn became our miracle. Nicholas stood in the back, his eyes burning. Elizabeth continued, "I'm not special. I'm just one of millions of women who work hard, do everything right, and still fall through the cracks. But someone saw me. Someone stopped. And because of that, 342 other families didn't have to live the nightmare I lived." The room erupted in applause. Then William did something no one expected. He walked up to the microphone. Elizabeth looked down at him, surprised. "I just want to say thank you to Mr. Nick," William said, his voice small but clear. "He didn't have to stop that day. He didn't have to help us, but he did. And now my mama helps other people every day. So if Mr. Nick hadn't found us, all those families wouldn't have been helped either." He paused, looking out at the crowd. One good choice made lots of good things happen. The room stood. The applause was deafening. Nicholas couldn't move. He just stood there, tears streaming down his face, watching this boy, this beautiful, brave boy, speak truth that cut straight through him. Late that night, Nicholas returned to his penthouse. Emma's photo sat on his desk next to William's framed drawing. He picked up both, held them together. "I found my way back, sweetheart," he whispered. "It took a wrong turn and a garbage dump and a mother holding her son like the world was ending. But I found my way back." He looked out at the city lights reflecting on Elliott Bay. Somewhere out there, 342 families were sleeping safely. Somewhere out there, Elizabeth and William were home, and Nicholas finally understood what he couldn't see when he was chasing billions. The richest people in the world aren't those with the most money. They're the ones who find the courage to stop, to see, to care. He set the photos down gently and smiled. For the first time in 5 years, he felt whole. If this story touched something in you, take a moment to like, share, and subscribe to Elevated Heart Stories. Tell us in the comments where in the world you're watching from, and if you've ever taken a wrong turn that changed your life. Because sometimes God uses the wrong road to lead us exactly where we need to be.